Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Contract Sync podcast. Welcome you along. We're going to have a bit of a chat today about all the things in between what happens in your sales pipeline and how it goes horribly wrong throughout the process. Now, today we've got a good friend of mine, Byron, on the show. Byron's Director of RevOps. He is a HubSpot and CRM extraordinaire. So I wanted to get him on and have a bit of a chat about some of the things that he does and some of the data wrangling that he does to really empower companies to get the most out of their sales pipeline and what happens afterwards. So, Byron, how's it going? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for that intro, Scott. That makes me sound pretty cool, but great to be here with you. Yeah, I guess a little bit of a background. I've been in data-related roles for about 7 years. Started out as an all-source intelligence analyst with the Army. So I've been very fond of making data-driven decisions and recommendations for a while, and then fell in love with the tech sector and switched over to revenue operations. And now I have the opportunity to work with you at Fable.
Not sure if it's a good opportunity to work with me, but considering you change out of the Army, it's probably maybe actually on par, to be fair. So obviously it's a bit of a change moving out of the Army and getting into the tech sector. What made you move into the tech sector, just out of interest?
Yeah, several things. It's a more sustainable career path. It's a bit more fun to be counting what SQLs and MQLs rather than beans and bullets. And it's pretty exciting to be involved with, cutting edge innovation. And in our instance, making the world more accessible for folks with disabilities. Really excited to be making a positive change.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, well, let's get into it. Start with a pretty broad question. Be pretty interested just to know what role data plays in the day-to-day of RevOps for you. How the intricacies of what you're tracking really shape the company and how you use those just to communicate what the company should be doing from day to day.
Yeah, I may need you to repeat some of those as we go. But RevOps needs to be data-driven. I think that's one of my go-to sayings. Like every decision should be data-driven in some fashion or another. I think if we're making decisions not based on data, we're just going into situations blind and uninformed.
100%. And just out of interest, when you look into that data side of things, what are some of the kind of common data points that you're tracking in your role at the moment?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so many ranging from different departments. In the sales team, we're looking at conversion rates, click rates, open rates, all the messaging effectiveness. We're looking at similarities on people we sell to, our ICP, our buyers personas, and just capturing all that data and keeping it in a usable and reportable format.
That's awesome. Now, I have kind of been down the route of trying to build out a CRM before, and I know it's a literal nightmare, and there's a lot of ins and outs. What's your approach generally when you come into a company that needs to start building a bit of maturity around their data pipeline? How do you think about structuring the data? What are the big picture things that you look at before digging into the small detailed parts of things?
Yeah, best of luck building a CRM. It sounds like a bit of a challenge. When I come into a new company, I normally just come and take a stock of what's in place right now, what data is being captured, what data needs to be captured. I like to do an analysis of the top ICP customers and the best deals that have happened and look for similarities, discrepancies, changes, and just get an understanding of what data should we be tracking. And then from there, are we tracking it? How are we tracking it? Is it reportable? And yeah, and then we can start tracking data. We can put processes in place. We can enable the team, and we're off to the battle.
Awesome. Now, obviously, when I think about all the listeners out there that will be listening in on this, there'll be people that come from a lot of different backgrounds. I know a lot of the people that will be listening come from a legal or a finance background. And whenever things pop up that might be an acronym that people aren't aware of, always trying to dig in and get people to understand what it means. Can you explain to us for a second what ICP means?
Oh, yes. Ideal customer profile. These are the accounts that you want to be selling to. You sell into them with the most efficiently compared to other industries, verticals, horizontals, whatever it may be. So these are your targets.
Awesome. And how do you go about defining an ICP and understanding what that looks like inside a CRM?
Oh, this is exciting. This is where RevOps really gets to have some fun and where we get to do the analysis with early stage and even late stage customers, because your ICP is always changing, or at least you should always be looking at it. We look at similarities, we look at trends, we look at conversion rates, and we see who we're selling to and how well we're selling to them. We look at days and stage and the different amounts and our upsell opportunities, and churn rates amongst different revenue bands, different industries, things like that. And from there, we can generate this ideal profile of companies that we can sell to, where we know if we're targeting these customers, we're going to be able to sell to 40 to 50% of the people we reach out to. And here's the average revenue.
It's awesome. Okay, so just before we move on from that for a second, let's dig into that a little bit further. So let's say I'm a first-time founder. I'm building out my first ever tool, and I'm starting to work with my sales team for the first time and trying to understand what is the ideal customer profile I should be selling to. Obviously, every industry it differs, but what are some kind of markers that you would look for in your CRM for that? Is it simple things like industry and company size, or are there more detailed things that you look at?
I think it can start out very simple. If you have a great data enrichment tool, you can enrich your CRM and get that information like industry, company size, revenue. Or you can have the team manually populate it. Since you're a first-time founder with a early stage startup, you can just pull that data manually. So I think you can start out with that base level information and you can get more granular from there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of companies really start off with that manual population and then try to improve it as they scale. When you are working with teams, people that are SDRs or BDRs, the more junior side of things, and those are the people qualifying the leads, what are some kind of recommendations you can give to people that work in CRMs to design data fields and things like that to make it easy to have that manually populated, but actually be able to pull out useful information that isn't all over the place?
Yeah, absolutely. With respect to all my sales friends out there, we got to break it down Barney style when we are working in the CRM. From there, I think when I'm capturing information from the sales team, I like to use pick list values, not the open text, free text fields, because from there we can report on them. So what that means for folks listening is we have a standard set of values, and folks can differ from those values. And we get to those initial lists of different values by running reports and maybe having a free form field in the beginning where we get an understanding of what the options may be. And then we create fields from there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that works almost for every function of a business, not just in the RevOps side of things, but being able to have that pick list or drop-down list where it keeps the data in a nice way that you can then use it to run reports on is a much better way to run things than having that kind of free text that you end up having not really useful information in and information that you can't really run reports on. So yeah, super agree with you on that point. One of the interesting things with that is as customers go through that pipeline, you have that early stage data enrichment, and then that influences decisions much further down the field. So that influences how AEs pick up deals, the information that they have when they pick up deals. It even goes as far to influence kind of renewals, influence people like myself who work in the finance and the legal side of things, where we have to do analysis on what industries we're selling to, what customer size we're selling to, and things like that. As you're starting to design this kind of data pipeline of how things move through the data pipeline and how things are captured throughout the sales cycle, what are the different team members that you end up working with along the way? So you're working with a lot of different people. I think RevOps is one of those positions that you have to take the input from a lot of different areas of the company. Who do you normally work with? What are the different ways that they pull you in to try and get the data out of RevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons I love working in RevOps. We get to work with a lot of different people. The function itself acts as somewhat of a bridge between sales and post-sales all the way through that. So we are getting to work with a lot of people. Talking about specific roles, gosh, we go all the way from BDRs, early stage working leads, through AEs to the sales managers, sometimes higher up if we escalate deals into sales leadership, and then through the finance team. That being said, all of those different individuals have data needs. The BDRs are always looking to see how they can prioritize the leads they're working, where they should spend their time, what the best messaging is. Sales team is looking for similar things. Which target accounts should they choose? Where should they focus? What their BDRs and them should be focusing on. And then, like you mentioned, for what sales leadership and finance, legal, they want to know who we're selling to and how we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, must be a bit of a hard job getting pulled in 10 different directions at once, but that's part of the role, I guess.
Yes.
Don't worry, you don't have to say too much more about that. I believe you. One of the interesting things about this is throughout that process, you have so many people that are involved in it and so many people that add information at different stages. What I find from a finance perspective is quite often there's this bit of a disjoint handover when sales close and the finance team and other teams like the renewal teams need to deal with the after sales process, whether it be invoicing or dealing with contract issues or creating deals for renewal within the CRM, so customers are followed up before renewal. The thing that I see in there is often there's a bit of a disjoint between the information that sits in the CRM that a sales team has put in and the finished version of a contract of what a customer is actually contracted with. How do you deal with those differences in information, the data integrity? What do you see as like the ultimate source of truth?
Yeah, that's tough. Just talking about the data and getting the data in the CRM in the first place, earlier stage, I like to use required fields throughout the pipeline. And that's how we effectively hand off deals from the BDRs to the sales team and then get legal and procurement involved just to make sure all of the right information is being populated. From there, we also leverage automation in our CRM. So we send email notifications, assign tasks with all the relevant information so people are brought in at the right time. Going to the source of truth, as RevOps, CRM is a source of truth for deal information and just about everything in life. And then I'd probably rely on Xero, our financing tool, for the source of truth on that side of the business.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I think the way I've dealt with it in the past, scaling up companies, is you do get to a point eventually that when you have enough pain points around this and you're starting to do enough volume in sales, you get to the point that your CRM is standardized with the products that you're selling so that you can have your line items in your CRM. You can have that integrate with a tool that creates your work order or your SOW, and that aligns the data transfer of what your salesperson has put into the CRM with what actually gets sent out as a contract. I find a lot of early stage companies haven't quite got to that point yet, and there's a disconnect. I know that's kind of has been an issue for me in the past. When that comes up, like how much data cleaning do you think is involved to make sure the team goes back and updates deals after they've been closed to make sure you deal with kind of the boring stuff, but the stuff that comes up in reporting, like your currency exchange values, if you're working in multiple currencies and an invoice is not quite aligning to what's in a CRM. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, just to deviate from your question for a little bit, because I really love what you were just talking about. It's the whole cash to quote process or quote cash rather, implementing something like Salesforce CPQ and then integrating that with Xero. It's absolutely incredible when you can have your invoicing tool and your CRM in harmony, and your line items are in the CRM and everything flows perfectly. Like you mentioned, a lot of startups aren't quite there yet because of, I don't know, the infrastructure required to get there, the maintenance, the cost, whatever it may be. So we're often not capturing all that information, and that makes us fill in that information after the fact, like you mentioned. So the team members, they can often find themselves spending hours, immediately after a deal closes or further down the line, reconciling information.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Don't worry, I've been there for plenty of deals in the past. It's the basic existence. When you work in finance and legal and everything has to be exactly to the dollar value, but things don't quite line up, it gives me a headache.
I think we can round. Yeah.
That's it. You talked a little bit about Salesforce and using that as a tool. What are some of the tools that you've used in the past that have worked really well for that scamming process?
Oh yeah, a big fan of Salesforce as a CRM, as well as HubSpot CRM for startups. It's incredibly easy, intuitive, and pretty low cost. From there, I think we all know the GTM tech stack that everyone's using. What Sales Loft, Outreach, all those tools we have are enrichment tools. We can go anywhere from there.
Yeah, definitely. Super boring question, but one that I'm super engaged with at the moment is people outside of that normal sales process that are also involved in it. One thing I grapple with a lot, because I work with legal teams in particular, is that really end of the sales cycle when things get into procurement, and they tend to get stuck there for a while because a lot of people in the sales teams, sales leaders, they don't necessarily have overview of the contract negotiation phase, and they kind of get caught in this catch-all term of it's with legal, which is, like, to me the most nightmare term, because that means you have no oversight whatsoever of what's going on or how long the deal is going to take, and it's really hard to kind of understand what's going on there. And I guess I've got a few questions around this, but one of my questions at the moment is, in the current environment, do you see that procurement term, how long deals are sitting in procurement, to be slowly starting to increase? I've kind of heard that ad hoc through a lot of companies I deal with. Is that something that you see in especially enterprise sales?
I think for us, it is slowly starting to increase as we start to focus more on our ICP, which is enterprise accounts. They typically have a longer procurement cycle. So we are seeing that increase there, and definitely feeling the pain with contract information being stuck with legal when we're trying to close deals.
Yeah, definitely. It's a hard thing to do. I always like to try and engineer ways to surface that process a bit more to the sales team. In the past, I've kind of gone and done hacks around surfacing legal negotiations in HubSpot, use ticket boards, use Trello, use everything under the sun. Nothing's really kind of fixed the problem for me. What are some of the tools that you've used in the past to deal with that end stage of the sales cycle?
Yeah, like you just mentioned, ticketing boards in either Salesforce or HubSpot, that does, highlight some of the information, where deals are, where they're stuck, and we can tag in relevant team members. Other than that, it's always been painful where I've been. What we've used, some sort of Word doc, something like that for communication. Weird platforms, it just hasn't been smooth.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always faced that problem in the past. Okay, that's interesting. And then, once you get over that hurdle, things are closed. Do you see RevOps having much of a role in the post-sale process of a deal?
RevOps should be. As I mentioned before, we're a bridge between sales and post-sales, so we should be involved there.
And like, run me through what the general post-sales process for RevOps is. Is there normally a process of enriching post-sales data? Is there normally a process of a handoff between the sales team and the finance team to invoice things? How do you work with the renewals teams to make sure that they have the information they need?
Yeah. To start off, I like to capture as much information as possible before the sale happens, because it's just easier to get salespeople to contribute, before they close the deal. So we have those required fields in place, and then do some sort of audit once the deal closes on some sort of cadence to fill in the rest of that information. Talking about handover, we previously mentioned this, but we set up email notifications, assign tasks to the finance team when it's time to set up invoicing. Similar things for the CS team. We have a handover process, as well as the renewal team. Some basic automation. When a deal closes, we automatically create a renewal deal and co-term it. So we have the deal with all the relevant fields there. We just need to get the team spun up on board.
Awesome. I know one of the post-sales things that I get quite interested in, especially in early stage startups, is you find in early stage startups, you go through this contract negotiation process. You tend to agree to things that you don't want to agree to with large enterprise customers, especially. You might agree to long payment terms. You might agree to like levels of liability that you really want to avoid, stuff like this. But at the end of the day, you got to get a deal over the line. One of the things that I am quite cognizant of, and I want to always keep track of, being someone that's on the post-sales side of things and the finance legal side of things, is how to capture those things that we've agreed to and want to renegotiate in the future. I think it's always important that once you do get that customer through the door, they start to really love your product. They start to grow a bit of attachment to it, so you have leverage to renegotiate a contract in the next time it comes up for a renewal. You mark those contracts that you initially made concessions on, and when it comes up for a renewal, it's a great time to reignite the conversation and say, hey, you know what, can we improve this contract that we have with you? With that, though, as you scale up, it's really difficult to keep up with all those different contract things that you've agreed to. Do you, in the RevOps side of things, see that as part of your role, is capturing all of those little nitty-gritty contract details that might seem insignificant for one customer, but when you have 100 or 200 or 500 customers, they start to build up to be quite annoying?
Yes, definitely. We work on it, but it is a pain point. An example of that is we have sales teams, working late stage deals, and they're not incredibly savvy on the legal side of things. So maybe they don't know very technical things that are changing in contracts, and they don't fully understand it as much as a salesperson would. So they're not able to bring that information into the CRM. And then there's some disconnect between the legal team or outside counsel, whoever it is, and they're not really able to populate that information in our standard fields in the CRM. So we don't track it properly. And then we end up trying to reconcile down in the future, and that involves someone reading through all of these contracts, which is a bit of a painful process. And also,
I can right with that, definitely.
Yeah, and that's for like the standardized like invoicing term, easy things like that, like what limitation of liability. When we talk about like red lines and specific things on contracts, I've never like done it well where I've been able to standardize those and see the red lines, I don't know, in a centralized location where I can look at them and understand for each account, here's what we had to do to close the deal.
Yeah, and it's something that I kind of often refer to as a massive black hole. That it's sometimes a metaphorical black hole that I have no idea how we got to this point, but this is what we agreed to, and what we agreed to is now trapped inside a 50-page MSA that I have really no way to access unless I read through the entire 50-page MSA again. Or it's more of a literal black hole where someone has created a folder that has 27 copies of an MSA, all of which are named various different things, none of which are called the actual signed version. And I have to open all 27 to figure out which one is actually signed. So it's definitely a process, and there's multiple startups I've gone through that have this issue. So it's super interesting. That's why I wanted to have a chat to you. I think it's interesting to see the RevOps side of this conversation.
Yeah, if I could, I don't know, have a tool that easily compares signed contracts to our base contract, captures the red lines, and then puts them in some sort of reportable and trackable form, that would be incredible.
Definitely. Yeah, I understand that pain, and something to work towards. Contract Sync is slowly working towards that, and a lot of our customers are really enjoying that as a feature in our product. But this is not too much of a product push, so we'll avoid that conversation for today and dive a bit deeper into your experience. So, kind of interested in, for you from a RevOps perspective, I know one of the core things that a lot of companies are working on at the moment is speeding up their sales cycle. And it's not just in the current economic environment, it'll always be the case. A faster sales cycle means faster growth, means a healthier company, faster money in the bank. It has so many benefits. From your perspective as someone that runs RevOps, how do you see the data that you collect during the sales pipeline process to be data that kind of helps the sales people speed up that sales cycle?
Yeah, I would say that data helps us draw conclusions and make recommendations, and those conclusions help salespeople speed up the process. I would typically perform this analysis just by looking at days in stage and seeing where we're seeing the longest lag or the longest stalled deals. And then from there, look at our different fields, our sales methodologies, and see if there's any similarities between deals that are stalled, deals that aren't stalled. If we can draw similarities and see that, like, whoa, most deals in this industry take a lot longer than others, maybe we can avoid that and focus on these others. Or, we're capturing this information and it's really helping us speed through this deal. We need to ensure data hygiene.
Yeah, 100%. You touched on something there for a second that I think is super important, but super hard to do, and a lot of startups struggle with it just because there's not much information, and that's with benchmarking against other companies in your industry or other similar sized companies. I try and do this a lot with company performance data, financial data, things like that. I usually draw on reports from venture capital companies where they have anonymized research data that they're willing to share, saying, this is how fast our portfolio companies are growing. This is the way our portfolio companies are performing in terms of NRR, GRR, gross margin, bits and pieces like that. But when it comes to sales cycles, it's not often I come across benchmarks for sales cycle information. Is this something that is a hidden secret that people in RevOps know where to find this information, or is it a bit of having friends in the industry, understanding the sales cycle from past roles? How do you find a finger in the air of what is a good sales cycle?
Yeah, I do want to, preface this answer by saying companies are unique. And while I do love and I value benchmarks, you should take that into consideration when you're looking at these, because your company could be unique. You could be more of a transactional product or a non-transactional product. So just be aware of that. That being said, I think we've all gone into Google and looked up how long should this conversion be for a SaaS company and gotten 7 different answers. No,
Yeah.
RevOps does not have a secret answer to this. We do have our willingness to look at different, I don't know, different pieces of data and perform analysis. What I typically do is join different communities on LinkedIn or Slack and just talk to other leaders in similar roles at similar companies, consult with business mentors, and look at conversion rates from previous companies.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's always one of those difficult things. As you said, every company's individual. Quite often the best thing to do is simply benchmark yourself against previous performance.
Absolutely.
To make sure that you're improving, quarter on quarter, year on year, things like that.
That is tough to do as a startup as well. If you benchmark yourself early on, you may be looking at early adopters. And as you start to, go through the sales cycle and focus on your ICP accounts, it could change. So yeah, important to benchmark, but it changes over time.
Yes, and it's definitely an interesting thing. As I've gone through multiple startups, one of the things that affects those benchmarks that I've seen is when you have a really strong founder who is really good at sales. And as that company grows and you start to move into a company where you have AEs that are coming on board, there's always that transition period of the amazing stellar sales record that a founder has and how that filters down to AEs and their sales records and their time to close. And I think, it's always a challenge to upskill those sales people that are coming on and try and build that continuous improvement cycle with them as well. With that, I know this is probably slightly aside from the RevOps side of things. Do you see, and this is one thing I've seen in companies in the past, do you see the sales training process to be something useful for sales teams to go through?
Oh, absolutely. Like one-off trainings, continuous training, sales enablement is key for a healthy sales, like I would say a healthy and effective sales organization.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've seen a lot of companies implement it from challenger sales, various different sales training programs. Do you feel like it's something that benefits the whole team? Do you think it should be focused on BDRs, should be focused on AEs? What side of the company do you think sales training should be focused on?
I think it should be focused on every team. Each team has different trainings that they should focus on, relating to BDRs, AEs, CS, and even renewal teams.
Awesome. That's fair. All right. We're about to run out of time, so I will pose the one question to you that everyone is wanting an answer to. And it's probably going to be the toughest question that you'll ever have to answer, but it has to be asked of every RevOps person. HubSpot or Salesforce?
Oh, you're going to make me do this. There's public listeners here. I actually have a great answer for this. I have historically always used Salesforce CRM, and I absolutely love it. I made a switch over to HubSpot CRM. I've used their marketing solution and then moved over to their CRM. And it was a shock at first, definitely some culture shock there. But I'm actually a huge fan now. So I'd hate to say, but if you're an early stage startup, I would probably recommend HubSpot CRM. And then at some point when you have the team and you're ready to scale, transition over to Salesforce. That's going to be controversial. You could also start out with Salesforce. But HubSpot is so easy. You don't need an admin. Founders can set it up. It's just a great solution.
I'm not sure whether you came down on one side or the other there, but I'll take it as it is. I have definitely worked with companies that have started with both, worked with companies that have started with Salesforce, worked with companies that started with HubSpot. I think I had more experience using HubSpot, super enjoyed the tool, but it did start to run into a few difficulties as we scaled to quite a large company. And I did get into some heated discussions with certain senior marketing members and companies that we worked with about whether we should move into their Salesforce instance. There was at one point the decision that we should fight it out in an alleyway to decide whether or not we went with Salesforce or HubSpot. Thankfully, it didn't get to that point because the senior marketing person was significantly larger than I was. I probably would have lost, but we did continue with HubSpot. So it's always
you continued with HubSpot. That is
HubSpot. So
I will have to hear more about that on a follow-up call. I imagine you would have switched over to Salesforce in the end.
No, we continued with HubSpot. I think it was because they got to learn the bird's nest that I'd built in HubSpot, and they didn't want to touch it with a 40-foot pole. But that's a story.
As we're talking about all of this data that we're capturing and the processes, switching from one CRM to another is a bit of a process. So take that into account when you're thinking about making this decision.
It most definitely is. And just the disclaimer that we are not sponsored by HubSpot or Salesforce. They're both great tools. Please make your own decisions. Byron, it's been great having you on. Really good discussion. I'll definitely have you back if you'll come. I'll say that much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was great talking with you.
Awesome. Always a pleasure. Thanks for listening, guys. And joining us next week, we're going to have a sales leader joining us to talk about how sales get into the mix with contract negotiations. And also, I'll be having a fantastic lawyer join in to have a bit of a chat about how lawyers can enable sales teams at the end of the sales negotiation process. So looking forward to that. Byron, thanks again. And thanks for listening in.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. See you next week.
Bye.